Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to take a deep dive into the fascinating world of cells, those tiny powerhouses that make life possible. We'll be exploring how they use energy, regulate their internal environment, and just generally keep things ticking.
It really is like a bustling city, isn't it? With all those intricate processes happening in perfect coordination.
Absolutely. And, our listeners here for those aha moments, those flashes of insight where you say, wow, I never knew that.
Right.
Our source material today is a lecture on biological homeostasis. We're going to zero in on three key players: enzymes, cell membranes, and energy.
Right.
So think of this deep dive as like your shortcut to understanding how they're all linked.
It's remarkable how these seemingly separate pieces all fit together to create this like symphony of life at the cellular level.
Okay, let's kick things off with enzymes. I always picture them as like tiny, hyper-efficient workers just zipping around and making sure reactions happen at lightning speed.
That's a great way to visualize them. Yeah, enzymes are catalysts, which means they speed up chemical reactions without getting used up in the process.
Yeah.
And they're essential for life because they allow our metabolism to run at the pace it does.
The lecture mentioned an example that really struck me. Bacteria in extremely cold environments. So they're these incredibly slow lifespans, right?
Right.
It's like their internal clocks are running on a delay because their reactions are just so sluggish without the help of enzymes.
Right. That's a powerful illustration of how crucial enzymes are. They lower the amount of energy needed to kickstart a reaction, like smoothing out a bumpy road so it's easier to travel.
So they're not changing the destination, just making the journey more efficient. I'm curious, though, do cells have a way to, control these little speed demons? What's stopping them from just going full throttle all the time?
That's where regulation comes in. Cells are masters of control, and they can fine-tune enzyme activity to make sure everything's running smoothly. This is often done through a process called inhibition. Imagine it like a dimmer switch for a light bulb.
Oh, wow.
Allowing the cell to adjust the brightness or the intensity of specific reactions.
So it's like a feedback loop.
Exactly.
The cell senses what it needs and then adjusts the activity of its enzymes accordingly. Fascinating.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about how a cell's environment can affect these hardworking enzymes. Temperature is a big one. You know how we humans function best at a certain temperature?
Right, around 37 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
Too hot and we overheat. Too cold and we can't function properly.
Exactly the same principle applies to enzymes. They have an optimal temperature range where they work their best. But what's amazing is that different organisms have adapted to thrive in vastly different environments. Think of those bacteria we mentioned earlier, living in those near boiling hot springs.
Oh, wow.
Their enzymes have evolved to function perfectly in those extreme conditions.
It's a beautiful example of how life, finds a way. Speaking of adaptation, I'm reminded of the time I tried keeping saltwater fish in a freshwater tank. Let's just say it did not end well.
Yeah, that's a perfect lead-in to our next point. Just like temperature, pH and solute concentration can have a dramatic effect on enzyme function. Imagine a saltwater fish suddenly plunged into freshwater. The change in salt concentration just wreaks havoc on its cells, and their delicate enzymes just can't function properly.
So it's all about maintaining that balance, that sweet spot where everything works in harmony.
Precisely. If conditions stray too far from the ideal, enzymes can denature, which means they lose their shape and essentially stop working. Think of it like a carefully folded origami crane just falling apart.
Okay, so we've established that enzymes are these tiny essential workers with very specific working conditions. What's next on our cellular tour?
Let's move on to the guardians of the cell, the magnificent cell membranes.
They're the gatekeepers, right?
Yeah.
Deciding what gets in and what stays out, but how do they do it?
Picture a cell membrane as a double layer of phospholipids, kind of like a sandwich with the fatty acid tails tucked inside. This creates a barrier between the cell's interior and the outside world.
So it's like a wall surrounding a bustling city. But even the best walls have gates, right?
Exactly. Cell membranes are selectively permeable, meaning they let some substances pass through easily while others need a little help. Think of it like customs at the border,
Okay.
Checking passports and allowing certain travelers through.
Got it. So we have our tiny workers inside and these gatekeepers controlling the flow of materials. This is already starting to feel like a well-oiled machine. What else is going on inside this cellular city?
Well, there's a lot of movement happening. Molecules are constantly entering and exiting the cell. And this movement can occur in a few different ways. The simplest is diffusion, where molecules naturally spread out from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. Think of it like opening a bottle of perfume in a room. The scent molecules will gradually spread out until the concentration is equal throughout.
That makes sense. It's like molecules are always trying to find their own space, just like people on a crowded subway.
Exactly. Small, nonpolar molecules can slip the membrane on their own. But what about larger molecules or those with a charge? They need a little assistance.
Is that where facilitated diffusion comes in? Like having a special pass to get through customs faster?
Precisely. Facilitated diffusion still relies on the concentration gradient, but it uses membrane proteins as doorways for specific molecules. These proteins come in two main types: channel proteins, which are like tunnels through the membrane, and carrier proteins, which bind to molecules and change shape to shuttle them across.
So it's all about having the right key for the right door. But what about those situations where molecules need to move against the flow, like swimming upstream? Surely that requires more effort.
You're absolutely right. That's where active transport comes into play. This process requires energy from the cell, often in the form of ATP, which is like the cell's currency.
So it's like paying a toll to cross a bridge.
A perfect analogy, and one of the most vital examples of active transport is the sodium-potassium pump. It constantly moves sodium out of the cell and potassium in, creating this crucial imbalance that is essential for things like nerve impulses and muscle contractions.
Wow. So it's not just about moving things around, it's about creating the right conditions for crucial functions. This pump sounds like a real workhorse.
It is indeed. But let's dive deeper into the specifics of how the sodium-potassium pump operates after a quick break. We'll be right back to continue exploring the fascinating world of cellular transport.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were marveling at the sodium-potassium pump, a tiny molecular machine that works tirelessly to maintain the right balance of ions inside and outside our cells.
A remarkable feat of cellular engineering, isn't it? Pumping those ions against their concentration gradient to create the electrochemical gradients that are essential for nerve impulses and muscle contractions.
It's like constantly pushing a boulder uphill, but for cells, it's absolutely essential for survival. So how exactly does this pump, manage to achieve this uphill battle?
Well, imagine a revolving door that only lets certain people in and out.
Okay.
The sodium-potassium pump uses energy from ATP to bind 3 sodium ions from inside the cell and releases them outside. Then it binds 2 potassium ions from outside the cell and releases them inside.
So it's like a carefully choreographed dance, constantly exchanging sodium for potassium, maintaining that critical imbalance.
Exactly. This imbalance is what creates the electrical potential across the cell membrane, like a tiny battery. This potential energy is then used to power various cellular processes, including nerve impulses and muscle contractions.
Amazing how such a tiny pump can have such a huge impact on our ability to think, move, and interact with the world around us.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears a bit and explore another fascinating process that occurs across cell membranes: osmosis. You can think of it as a specialized type of diffusion, but instead of molecules moving randomly, it's all about the movement of water.
Okay, so how does osmosis differ from regular diffusion?
Well, in osmosis, water moves across a semi-permeable membrane from a region of high water concentration to a region of low water concentration. However, the driving force isn't the water itself, but the concentration of dissolved substances, or solutes, on either side of the membrane.
So the water is basically trying to dilute the side with the higher concentration of solutes.
Precisely. Think of it like this. If you have a container divided by a semi-permeable membrane, and one side has a higher salt concentration than the other, water will move from the side with less salt to the side with more salt, trying to even out the concentration.
Ah, I see. And like diffusion, this is a passive process, right? No energy required from the cell.
Exactly. Water molecules are small enough to slip through the membrane without assistance. Let's connect this concept to something you've likely experienced firsthand. Have you ever noticed what happens when you forget to water your plants?
They wilt, of course. I never really thought about the science behind it, though.
Well, that wilting is a direct result of osmosis. When the soil dries out, the solute concentration outside the plant cells becomes higher than inside. So water moves out of the plant cells, causing them to shrink and lose their turgor pressure, which is the pressure that keeps them plump and upright.
Wow, so osmosis is the culprit behind drooping plants. It's incredible how something as simple as the movement of water can have such a noticeable effect.
It's a testament to the power of these fundamental processes. Now let's delve a little deeper into the different types of solutions that cells can encounter and how they impact osmosis. We have isotonic, hypotonic, and hypertonic solutions.
Those terms, like, ring a bell from high school biology, but I could definitely use a refresher.
All right, let's use red blood cells as an example.
Okay.
In an isotonic solution, the solute concentration outside the cell is equal to the concentration inside. Therefore, water moves in and out at the same rate, maintaining the cell's normal shape.
So isotonic basically means everything is in equilibrium.
Right. Exactly. Now imagine placing that red blood cell in a hypotonic solution where the solute concentration outside is lower than inside.
So there's more water outside the cell, relatively speaking.
Precisely. In this scenario, water rushes into the cell, attempting to dilute the higher concentration of solutes inside. This can cause the cell to swell and, in extreme cases, even burst, a process known as lysis.
Oh no. So hypotonic solutions are like water balloons waiting to explode.
That's a vivid image. On the other hand, we have hypertonic solutions, where the solute concentration outside the cell is higher than inside.
So in this case, water would move out of the cell.
You got it. The water exits the cell trying to dilute the higher solute concentration outside, causing the cell to shrink and shrivel. In plant cells, this loss of water leads to a decrease in turgor pressure, resulting in those wilting leaves we talked about earlier.
It's fascinating how the movement of water can have such drastic effects on cells, depending on the surrounding environment.
It's a delicate dance between solutes and water, essential for maintaining cell shape and function. And remember, all of this happens without the cell expending any energy, thanks to the natural properties of diffusion and osmosis.
It's a testament to the elegance and efficiency of these fundamental processes. So we've covered simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis. Are there any other ways that molecules move across cell membranes?
Yes. There's one more key player we need to discuss in more detail: active transport. We briefly touched on it with the sodium-potassium pump, but it's worth exploring further.
Okay, remind me again. What makes active transport different from the other processes we've discussed?
Active transport requires energy from the cell, typically in the form of ATP, to move molecules against their concentration gradient, from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration.
So it's like swimming against a strong current. It takes a lot of effort.
An excellent analogy. Cells use active transport for many crucial functions, like maintaining specific ion concentrations, absorbing nutrients from the digestive system, and removing waste products.
It sounds like active transport is the real heavy lifter of the cellular world, working tirelessly to keep things running smoothly.
Precisely. But instead of just listing examples, let's delve into a specific type of active transport called endocytosis.
Endocytosis. That sounds intriguing. What is that all about?
Endocytosis is a process by which cells engulf large molecules, particles, or even other cells by forming vesicles from their cell membrane. Imagine a cell extending its membrane to surround a particle like a Pac-Man gobbling up a dot.
So it's like the cell is taking a big bite out of its surroundings. What kind of things do cells engulf through endocytosis?
Well, there are a few different types of endocytosis, each with its own specific purpose. For example, phagocytosis is a form of endocytosis where cells engulf large particles like bacteria or cellular debris. It's a key part of our immune system's defense mechanism.
Wow, so our cells are literally swallowing up invaders. That's amazing.
It is indeed. Another type of endocytosis is penocytosis, where cells take in fluids and dissolved substances. Think of it like the cell is taking tiny sips from its environment.
So it's a way for cells to stay hydrated and absorb nutrients.
Exactly. And there's also receptor-mediated endocytosis, which is a more targeted process where specific molecules bind to receptors on the cell surface, triggering the formation of a vesicle. It's like the cell has a specific shopping list and it only takes in the items that match.
It's incredible how cells have developed such specialized mechanisms for taking in different substances. But if cells can bring things in through endocytosis, they must have a way to release things as well, right?
You're absolutely right. The counterpart to endocytosis is exocytosis, a process by which cells release substances from vesicles that fuse with the cell membrane.
So it's like the cell is spitting things out.
A good way to visualize it. Exocytosis is used for a variety of purposes, such as secreting hormones, neurotransmitters, and enzymes.
So it's how cells communicate with each other and release their products into the surrounding environment.
Precisely. Endocytosis and exocytosis are crucial for maintaining cellular functions, regulating the internal environment, and ensuring the cell can interact with its surroundings.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. from the intricacies of the sodium-potassium pump to the fascinating world of endocytosis and exocytosis. It's amazing how these tiny cells are constantly working, moving molecules, and maintaining balance to keep us alive and functioning.
It's a symphony of processes, all orchestrated with remarkable precision and efficiency. But before we wrap up our deep dive into the world of cells, let's take a moment to connect these concepts back to you, our listener. What are some key takeaways you can apply to your own life?
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that even the tiniest units of life are incredibly complex and fascinating. It makes you appreciate the wonder of the natural world on a whole new level.
Absolutely. And understanding how cells function can give us a deeper appreciation for our own bodies and how to take better care of ourselves.
Exactly. Just like cells strive to maintain balance, we also need to find balance in our own lives, in our diet, exercise, sleep, and stress levels.
Well said. By understanding the principles of cellular biology, we can make more informed choices about our health and well-being.
This deep dive has definitely left me with a newfound appreciation for the incredible processes happening inside me right now. But before we sign off, I'm curious to hear your final thoughts on the topic. What's one key takeaway you hope our listener walks away with today? Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on quite a journey today exploring this intricate world of cells and how they manage to, keep us alive and functioning.
It truly is remarkable, isn't it? From the tireless work of those enzymes to that delicate dance of molecules across cell membranes, there's so much happening at that microscopic level that we just often take for granted.
It's like a hidden universe operating inside each of us, a symphony of processes that we rarely stop to, appreciate.
Right. And yet, understanding these processes can give us this really profound sense of awe and wonder, not only for the complexity of life, but also for the interconnectedness of everything.
I completely agree. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one key takeaway you'd like our listener to, ponder?
I think the most important message is this. The same principles that govern the life of a tiny cell also apply to us as individuals and as a society. Just like a cell needs to maintain balance, so do we. Just as a cell needs to adapt to its environment, so do we.
That's a powerful insight. We often think of ourselves separate from the natural world, but in reality, we're deeply embedded within it. The same forces that shape a cell also shape us.
Precisely. So next time you feel overwhelmed by the complexities of life, just remember the incredible efficiency and resilience of a single cell. It's a reminder that even in the face of challenges, there's this inherent order and beauty in the way that life unfolds.
Beautifully said. And for you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked a curiosity to learn more about the world within you. We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully we've provided you with some aha moments and a deeper appreciation for the miracle of life.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop marveling at those wonders that surround us, both big and small.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.
You said you didn't receive them, but you said you didn't need them. That girl is a real crowd pleaser. Small world, all the friends know me. Young boy living like an old geezer. Quick release the cash, watch it fall slowly. Frat girl still trying to